I think China, as well as Europe, they seem to be more open to newer technologies. So the adoption rate is a lot faster.
Hi, this is Sogan Bhartia, and I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors who make this show not only possible but also a lot of fun. Being a sponsor of the show has its own benefits, including but not limited to grading on the show itself. So if you want to become a sponsor, please check the details we have posted below. And now let's go ahead and enjoy the show. Hi, I'm Swapnil Bharti, and we are here at the OpenStack Summit in Vancouver, Canada. And today we have with us Alfie from Inspur. So Alfie, can you please tell us what is Inspur?
What is Inspur? Well, good questions. Inspur is the number 3 server vendor in the world. So we moved up the rank quite quickly, right? So less than a year ago, we were at number 5. So in less than a year, we moved up the rank quite fast. Now it's up to number 3. So we ship to over 100 countries, and we have regional offices all over the world.
What do you ship?
Servers. There's all kinds of servers, right? So we embrace the openness. So as this hardware and hardware, we are the only server vendor that cover all the open hardware platforms today, right? So that includes the ODCC, that is the Scorpio project. Is primarily is being used in China. The BAT companies like Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, and OCP, right? You know, is originated from Facebook, right? And OCS, right? And then the latest being the Open 19. So we have quite a bit of coverage, and then of course we have the standard 19-inch servers that we ship everywhere.
So none of your hardware boxes are black boxes, they're all open source kind of boxes?
They are x86 based, primarily, yeah, x86 based.
Awesome.
Yeah, so.
You're a hardware vendor. What are you doing at OpenStack? It's all about software-defined cloud.
We are a solution provider, let's put it that way. And although we are very good at doing hardware, so we do software too.
Right.
So the reason we're here today is to do an announcement of our latest OpenStack suite. It's called In-Cloud OpenStack, In-Cloud OS, release 5.5. So that's what we're doing today here. And we have made a lot of improvements since last year's 5.0 release. So in terms of management, ease of management, we have the unified management system. There's a very extensive coverage of all the management pieces that you can do. Managing the underneath infrastructure of your OpenStack infrastructure. And then we did a lot of work in the security side of things to making the OpenStack infrastructure more secure and with a trusted environment, right? So scalability is another thing. And today with this release, we are able to achieve over 1,000 nodes per a single cluster. So that is real good, right? And then we can do that across regions, right? So we can manage multiple regions and with a single separate namespace, but we can manage it, in a unified fashion.
Why do you need to spread out to multiple regions?
For scalability.
Is it about scalability as well as redundancy also?
It's redundancy and scalability.
What if
and all of
one
that,
region
right?
goes down, there is a flooding and the power is out for...
Right. So we have a reference architecture, right? It's just 3 data centers in 2 regions, right? For example. So you have a data center A and data center B may be located in the same city with close proximity. Close, I mean, within 150 kilometers or 100 miles. Right, So if one goes down, you still have the data center B to take over, but they are operating in active fashion. So the performance is there, the latency is absolutely great, and then you have the also another backup maybe in another city, another location, in the across the country, right, somewhere remote. So that is the one that backs up the first two. So you have a high availability and high redundancy situation with this kind of deployment. So that is the redundancy, and then you scale it out with the multiple regions. Yeah.
Right. Is OpenStack the only software solution that you provide, or there are other solutions also depending on your customers you also offer?
Right. So HPC is we are very strong on HPC. So we've been in this area for a long time. For example, we the last generation of the supercomputer, the fastest in the world, we helped build that in China, and then the latest supercomputer Sunway is we also have participation in it. So we come from a pretty high performance computing environment, right? So we use a lot of that. That is not only hardware alone, right? So you have a lot of technical know-hows in the software side. So that is one thing, and then also artificial intelligence, right? So everybody is talking about artificial intelligence these days. So we have done a lot of work in artificial intelligence in terms of deep learning frameworks. So we open source some of the frameworks that we have engaged in. For example, Cafe MPI. We extended the Berkeley version of the original Cafe framework, and then we added the multiple cluster, multiple node support to it, so you can scale a lot better, right? So we open source that. So that is some of the things that we do.
Let's talk about Chinese market versus because in the previous conversation you said that you are expanding into U.S. market as well. So why are you have a big market? Why are you moving to U.S.?
Well, we capture a lot of business in China, right? Being a China-based company, but really is we expanding globally. So previously I mentioned we're shipping our products to over 100 countries, right? So we actually is really a global company. So, but today a lot of the revenue is coming from China, right? So we are the top players there. But the thing is that when you are at the top, growth is more difficult, right? So I think coming to the U.S., I think is the right timing, and also not only the U.S. but Europe as well, right? So that is I guess is the final frontier, for us, if you will. So that is the quickest way to grow our company in a global sense. So U.S. is still the biggest market in the world. So we have left it, alone for a long time, and then we just coming to North America about 3-4 years ago, and we have since made a lot of inroad into the market, and that's why we are growing so fast. Is that now we're up to number 3.
Right. So when you compare U.S. market with the Chinese market in terms of technology or adoption of new technologies, what difference do you see?
China right now, for the past few years, is embracing open source technologies in a big way, right? And then I think open source is really leveling out the playing field for a lot of startups in China. And it's like you don't have to have invest right at the get-go huge amount of resources into it, right? So you can actually get up to speed rather quickly by relying on open source, right? So as the collective talents that exist today in the open source community is far greater than any one company can imagine, right? So that is the quickest way to get to the market, right? So that's what's happening in China, and also, you know, open is the key, really, is the open source software as well as open hardware platforms. So people are really paying attention to it. I think in the West, is also is happening in a big way.
Right. Yeah. But if you look at the Chinese or European market versus US market, like in Europe, they are coming with GDPR. You know, the different countries have their own different policies regarding, you know, either privacy or, you know, access. So does that also play in any role whatsoever? Like Europe leans more towards private cloud versus because you have customers everywhere. So do you see any effect of that also which kind of makes a big difference in the market itself?
I think it's not from my angle, because, you know, we're looking at it as open is open, right? It's the, you
like
know,
in China, Baidu and all the bad companies, they're building their own big giant public clouds based on OpenStack. You know, versus Amazon, you know, encroaching the market. So that I see a clear difference there, because there's more ownership within the country itself instead of relying on the.
Right. I think you know, OpenStack is more suitable for large enterprises and down, right? If you look at the OpenStack latest survey, right? Yes. So you can see that, right? You know, from 10 servers and then all the way up to maybe 1,000 servers, right? So that is the space that you know, OpenStack is playing in. Now, if you're looking at the big hyper the cloud companies, right? Big large companies, right? They pretty much, you know, build their own way, right? They do it they've been rolling their own way, right? You know, because of the fact that they are big, they have the huge amount of resources in engineering, in you know, financial terms, right? So they can afford to build a lot faster, right? So that is a big difference there.
In addition to consuming a lot of open source technologies in China, what is the situation of contribution? Because does language play any role? Because, you know, most of the stuff, documentation or all the stuff is in English, or how do you tackle that problem?
Right. So the way I look at it is that, you know, software is software, right? So it's a universal language, right? You know, C, C++, Java, right? You know, Perl and all the rest of it, right? You know, so people all around the world is very well versed on the programming language itself. Maybe there's something that in the documentation maybe is lacking in terms of, you know, documenting it and translating it into English. So there are a lot of, you know, room for improvement, but other than that, it's not an issue at all.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, because I was having some word with some people. So, you know, that's what I wanted to ask to you, because there's a perception, you know, that maybe there may be a barrier, but you cleared that no, that's not a case at all. I mean, if you look at OpenStack and, you know, from Inspur's perspective, what are the new use cases that you are seeing in the space?
Okay, you know, other than the amount of customers that we have, I mentioned, you know, we have over 4,000 customers today across multiple industries. So one of the use cases, for example, in the financials, right? So you know, we just help some of the top banks to deploy OpenStack, and then they're running their core business on top of OpenStack today. So that is, you know, in financials, in banking, right? So some of the financial companies, they are building the biggest OpenStack cluster in China, right? And then we have also helped a large enterprise company just recently to build a OpenStack infrastructure of more than 1,000 servers, 1,000 nodes in a single cluster, right? So there's a lot of use cases that, you know, all across the board, right? Because you know, if you look at the more than 10 industries or verticals, right? We have oil and gas, we have banking, financial, we have public safeties, and you know, all across the board. So it's very healthy growth.
Before I move to the next use case, you mentioned financial services. Sometimes financial services and these kind of industries are very, very reluctant to adopting new technologies, especially cloud. Is it different in China? Because
It's no different in China, but I think China is more, seems to be, you know, from my perspective, because I've been in the U.S. for a long time, right, you know, and I think China, as well as Europe, they seem to be more open to newer technologies. So the adoption rate is a lot faster. It seems that, you know, the North America is a little bit more conservative in that sense, right? So that is one thing. The other thing is, you know, we have a very extensive security layer built into the product with different security modules, right? So that the bank is absolutely, you know, deploying a lot of those modules to make their system secured and in compliance with all the regulations.
and now let's talk about the use cases. I want to talk IoT.
Sure.
So what kind of adoption, or can you talk about that? Because I am aware of a lot of work is going on there.
Yeah, definitely. IoT, if you look at it, it's really all about data, right? All about data, all about computing, right? You know, just processing all the data, vast amount of data, right? And the recent survey just came out, or analysts just came out as about, you know, we're talking about 180 zettabyte by 2025. That is huge, right? And then in terms of the number of devices out there, is going to be quadrupling what we have today to a number of 80 billion devices out there. So there's a lot of devices, a lot of data. And then when you look at the sheer volume of data, then what do you do with the data, right? You know, it's just you have to process it, right? So, you know, that requires a lot of hardware and the software stack to process all this data. So we want to play, we are beautifully positioned to play at the infrastructure layer, right? So to providing the you know, the engines, you know, underneath of all that, and then to process all the data. So that's where we want to play in. And some of the example, I think in China, right, is we involved in a lot of the building of smart cities, right? So that is a lot of, you know, that is right in the realm of IoT and edge computing, right? So there's a lot of sensors all over the map. And then we're taking in a lot of data and we're processing it. So we're building a lot of this, not all by ourselves, but, you know, working with partners, you know, across multiple industries, right? So you know, when you look at IoT, is not one single technology, right? It's a whole bunch of technologies that come together. Something, nothing, not too many new things, but, you know, there are new things in there, but it's the most of the technologies are already there, right? It's sort of, you know, using the existing technology in a way that fits into the IoT world, right?
And you mentioned machine learning AI earlier, but I think machine learning also play a big role in AI, because when you're collecting all the data, the data itself has no value unless until you are, you know, using. So from Inspur, you know, you are only, because you also talked about machine learning also in addition to OpenStack solutions. So what are you doing in IoT space with machine learning?
One of the example is that, you know, you're collecting a lot of images, right? In the, you know, in a smart city, again, in a smart city, right? You have all the sensors, you have all the cameras, and you know, you're monitoring the environment and you're taking pictures of the real streaming of the data, videos, or, you know, the road conditions and all that. So all of that needs to be processed. So machine learning and deep learning, processing all the data, all the images and all of that. So that's involved a lot of the deep learning or machine learning algorithm and methodologies, right? So that's how we, I think, we are doing it with.
Since here in this conference, there are two things that we kept hearing a lot. One was IoT and one was machine learning. IoT is kind of use case which is becoming really big, which is spanning across industries. So can you kind of from your perspective, what do you think about what's going on in this space?
It's growing. It's growing tremendously. You look at the sheer volume of data that is projected, into not the distant future, right? It's vast amount of data. Data is the, as people put it, is a new oil, right? So that is what you have to do. It's all about data. So it's all about processing the data more efficiently, more quickly. Right, so that has a lot to do with the way you design your software in terms of machine learning, right? New algorithms, right? New frameworks are coming into the market, right? And then new hardware gears toward doing deep learning and machine learning, maybe GPUs, and then we are looking at the new ways to doing it with, for example, FPGA, right? So there are a lot of cases that the FPGA is good at doing something. Maybe for the majority of the things that you can do it with the GPU, some of the things that you can do it with the FPGA. So there's a lot of innovation, a lot of new applications that we are working on in terms of how or most effective way of using the hardware and the software to put it all together. The ideas, again, processing the data faster and quicker.
Okay, this is the question I have been asking everybody, so I'll be asking you also.
Okay.
You can choose to answer or not answer, but yeah, I'll just ask you. So, okay, we talked about technology, we talked about OpenStack, what do you do in your free time?
What I do in my free time?
Yeah.
Sports, I love sports, right?
Okay.
So not participating in sports because, I've been doing that, many years, but I hurt myself, right? Over time, age catch up to you, right? So you have, here and there, things here, things there, and
right.
then, so I don't do that as much as I wanted to. But now it's like watching a lot of NBA games and some football, and I used to watch a lot of baseball. But as right now, I feel that it's just too slow of a pace for me.
Okay.
So I love basketball, college, and go to games and travel. Travel is another thing that I love to do. I travel with my wife, travel with the family, and whenever I get a chance. And in my line of work, and I do quite a bit of traveling to trade shows and stuff like that.
So how much traveling is pleasure versus work? Or it's just you bundle all together and call it travel?
It's a tough one because it seems like everything that we do these days, at least in the IT industry,
Right.
is consumed by work, right? And then with all the the IoT of things, right? And then all the devices that you have, or everyone processes, right? It seems like you cannot get away from it. It's
Right.
just so easy. You're doing something, you're looking at your iPhone or Android phone,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, something from work just pop up in the email, and then you just
Yeah, just reply that.
you just have to look at it, right? But I think it's a tough one. We have to balance it, and my wife always keep me in check on that. So is that we should be talking We should be, doing things together instead of you sitting in front of the computer. So I got that a lot, and I think you do too. Right?
Yeah, same
Yeah.
case here. Yeah, and I have my work is kind of my hobby also. I love technology in general. So my wife thinks I'm working, but I'm just having fun. Like talking to you is kind of fun for me as well,
Yeah,
and it's part of work.
Exactly.
So she doesn't realize that I'm not working. Somebody's paying me to just live my hobby.
Exactly.
So it's hard to explain, but
Yeah.
that's why.
Yeah.
Anyway, Alfie, it was nice talking to you today, and hopefully we'll catch up again at some next open source, because you're doing a lot of work in open compute and everything. So hopefully we'll see you again.
Sure. I'd love to do that. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.